Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we get the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We have a 2-in-1 show for you tonight, all on the petroleum sector. We're going to look at the ENI Vitol arbitration against Ghana. So the Ghana ENI Vitol case, where Ghana tried to unitize or bring together two blocks and bring a third partner into an agreement. The two companies sued Ghana or sent Ghana to international arbitration, and the award was sent a few days ago. It has generated controversy because different people in the case have put their own interpretation on what the arbitration rule means. We're going to resolve that for you tonight and also speak to a man who heads an institution that warned the president about this 3 years ago. Indeed, on the 16th of July 2021, the Africa Center for Energy Policy wrote a letter to the president asking him to stop the attempted unitization. Well, the rest, they say, is history. Later on, we'll speak to the CEO of the Petroleum Hub Development Corporation on their plans for the creation of the Ghana Petroleum Hub. All that and more when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So tonight is going to be a bit technical, but we'll make it pretty simple. So I'm going to first tell you what the arbitration is about, and then I'll give you highlights of what the judgment or the award, if you want, is. Then I'll give you the two main parties, what they've said about this award, and then try and understand from their civil society groups why this was even not necessary, why Ghana shouldn't have taken this path at all. So if you go to page 9 of the over 460-page award, it basically says the dispute arises out of a petroleum agreement in respect of the blocks offshore Cape 3 points. Now, this agreement was concluded in March 2006, initially between Ghana, the GNPC, and of course Vitol, right? And then of course ENI. Now, essentially the Ministry of Energy, through the Ministry of Energy, ordered what is called the unitization of two oil fields. So there's the offshore Cape 3 points. This is operated by Vitol. Now, Vitol is a Swiss upstream Ghana company, or a Swiss oil company. ENI is, if you like, an Italian oil company. So they operate what is called the OCTP, all right? There's also the West Cape 3 points operated by a Ghanaian company, Springfield Exploration, right? Springfield. Now, the Ministry of Energy decided to unitize the two fields. So one field was producing oil, the other field had not been fully explored to even know how much oil was on it. But by our law, the government said, look, two foreign companies are operating one field. There's another field close to it. There's a Ghanaian company that owns that field. Let's bring that field together so that the three of you can operate the two fields. The international company said, no, we've invested money in these fields, and these fields have proven reserves. We've been producing oil from these fields. This West Cape 3 points field has not been tested. We don't know how much it has. So not only will we lose, the country would lose, right? So this is basically the center of the issue, and basically said, what the government was trying to do through the Ministry of Energy was unlawful. And they basically said they were breaching the laws of Ghana, all right? But they felt that the fact that this was a Ghana government position against them, they wouldn't get justice in a Ghanaian court because, incidentally, there had been cases earlier that they sent that they lost. So they decided to take the matter to international arbitration. Now, here's a summary of what the arbitration found. They said Ghana breached the petroleum agreement by issuing these unitization directives in the circumstances in which they were issued. So, because this is technical, it's not the fact that the unitization is illegal, because our laws allow this, but they are saying the way they did it. For example, they say the statutory trigger for commencing unitization under Ghanaian law was not properly established before the Ministry of Energy issued the unitization directive, right? And then they also say that the imposition of unitization terms through the October and November directives were procedurally and substantively flawed, right? Then they also said that the determination of the initial tracked participation was arbitrary and lacked proper justification. Basically, the components of the field that were to be brought together, they felt that the way the government went about it was not right. Now, so this was against the government. However, the tribunal dismissed the claimants, these two foreign companies, ENI and Vitol, their claims for damages, finding that the damages claim was based on what they call unsubstantiated assumptions about the future enforcement of the unitization directive. But the tribunal left open the possibility of future damages claims if the directives were enforced. So you can say on this one, initially, government wins. Now, the tribunal also dismissed the counterclaims by the Ghana government because Ghana had made a counterclaim against the companies. The tribunal dismissed that. And of course, on a matter of cost, the tribunal ordered each party to bear its own cost, but required Ghana to pay 50% of the claimant's portion of the arbitration cost. There was no award of interest. So you can say, if this is boxing, ENI and Vitol have won on points, but it's more like a split decision. It's not a unanimous decision. So this is what this is supposed to mean in English. Now, the Attorney General of Ghana issued a statement on the 8th of July, it's 2 days ago, which statement found its way into many media portals, including citynewsroom.com, which obviously shared its side of the story. So some of the things they said was that, this is the headline, press release, final award in international arbitration between ENI and Vitol versus GOG and GMPC. It says, on 8 July, the International Arbitration Tribunal in action instituted by ENI and Vitol against GOG and GMPC issued its final award. Now, this is what the Attorney General is saying. 1, the tribunal dismissed the claimant's request that the tribunal declared that Ghana breached the petroleum agreement by refusing to withdraw or prevent reliance by third parties on unitization directives, technical language. They also said the tribunal dismissed the claimant's request that Ghana notify the High Court, Court of Appeal and Supreme Court of Ghana that the unitization directives were issued in breach of petroleum agreements. But this is the key thing that they said, which we believe is key here. The tribunal found that in the circumstances in which they were issued, the directives from the government breached the petroleum agreement. That is to say, the specific unitization directives were contrary to the application or applicable regulation. So this is a key point. Then, of course, he also talks about the tribunal affirming Ghana's right or authority to unitize oil fields. That is not in doubt. So Ghana can go ahead and do this in future if they use the right method. And then AG also then highlights paragraph 6 that the tribunal denied the claimant all claims to monetary damages. Initially, then according to the AG, the claimant said he had wanted $7 billion, revised to $915 million plus interest. All right, and then of course, the claims against GMPC were dismissed, among other things. So this is what the AG said, and we all publish this because usually these awards take a few days to come out. So usually you publish the side of the government, and when the other side also sends a statement, you publish. Now, ENI sent a press release the same day, and their title is that ENI, Ghana, and Vitol received positive decision from International Arbitral Tribunal. So it's like two parties say we won the election. NDC say they won, PPC say they've won. Now, let me read 2 paragraphs of this. ENI, Ghana, Exploration and Production, and Vitol Upstream, Ghana, have received a positive decision from an International Arbitral Tribunal regarding their unitization dispute with the Republic, ruling in favor of their long-standing opposition to the Ministry of Energy's unitization directives. And then they go on to say, basically some of the things that have been said here. So they say they've won, government say they've won. So let's talk to Ben Boakye. Ben Boakye is the executive director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Now, on the 16th of July 2021, he wrote a letter to the president asking him to stop what the government was trying to do in attempting to unitize these 2 oil fields. He said Ghana was going to lose. He seems to have been proven right. But let's find out. Ben, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
First and foremost, is my summary of the situation correct?
Significantly, but I think the point about winning points is really not what I see from the judgment.
You think it was a knockout? It wasn't winning by points. It was what? A unanimous decision or what?
It was a knockout.
Oh, it was a knockout.
It was a knockout.
Okay.
A technical knockout of the case that was before the court. And essentially, the fact of the matter is that E&I did not go to court to say that Ghana has stolen 87 billion and they want it back.
Okay.
They want to say that Ghana has acted unlawfully and interpreted its law wrongly by issuing the unitization directives without fulfilling the scientific evidence that would justify unitization. I think that is essentially what was before the court. And for the court to determine whether Ghana had basis for instructing that the fields be unitized. And throughout the conversations and the back and forth, even before they went to court, there had been evidence to suggest, there had been letters, positions, third-party evidence to suggest that there was a lot of work that needed to be done. Unitization itself, everybody agrees, is not wrong, where the interest of the state can justifiably be amplified. It is important because they are all commercial entities. Everybody wants more by spending less. And that's what unitization actually tries to do. So that what two parties can come together to do, they don't do separate investments to achieve one common objective, particularly when the fields are adjacent to each other and they are close enough to ensure that they work together to optimize the interests of all the parties. So it's not wrong, and all of them agrees that unitization is not wrong. But you need to generate the scientific body of evidence to be able to come to that conclusion so that you are not just bringing somebody to come and benefit from the resources that may belong to one party. And that is basically what they sought in court, and they were granted. And the court said Ghana was wrong. So whether the reliefs, the damages were given or not, is actually besides the point. And if you read the judgment, the court even says that they will not grant it because the damages have not materialized. If you read the 451, you even get the import of what the judges were saying much more clearly. They even says that even though they calculated it, the 915 million, I mean, it was actually 838 million dollars.
Yes.
838 plus interest. Yes. So what they were saying that even though the expert calculated that to be the cost, if Ghana had implemented the directive, they didn't expect to receive that money. And the judges were reminding them that yes, you are not receiving that money because it hasn't materialized, but you have to also pay attention that if Ghana proceeds to take the actions that they were proceeding with, then that becomes actionable. You need to take that money. You need to, have the right to those claims. So they didn't say that that calculation was wrong. All that they were saying is that it was not yet ripe for Ghana to claim that money.
Okay.
But
let me actually read
of Ghana. Yes.
Let me read 452 and 453 to just ground that point for all of us. So 452 says, therefore, based on what you said about 451, the calculation was 838, right? Therefore, the tribunal considers that the damages claim currently before it is grounded on unsubstantiated assumptions and must be dismissed on this threshold basis. 453, this determination is without prejudice to the claimant's right to claim damages if, despite this award, the wrongful unitization directives are enforced, provided that claimants are, of course, able to establish their losses and evidence the quantum of their damage claims. So you're saying this is more a secondary matter. The key point is that the approach used to unitize was wrong in law, and the arbitration agreed with the claimants. As for the calculation of what damages to be paid, is a secondary issue in your respective view.
Yes, because Ghana had not enforced the unitization. They had not proceeded to enforce the unitization the way they wanted. So because at the same time, they went to arbitration to stop government from doing so. And that gave them time for this ruling to actually come in before any further action could be taken by the government. So that was the basis for not awarding the cost to them. And if you look at the pleadings of Ghana, even in some instances, they were arguing that whatever costs that associate with the development of the field, Ghana pays through oil. So if you go to court and tell the court that whatever cost that arises is paid through our oil, and therefore they cannot make additional claim, what they are saying is that it's fine. If that can be a cost oil and it is deductible, it doesn't really matter. So for me, the substantive case is what we should be focusing on. What took the Ghana and ENI and Vitol to court, to intervene on this matter. And it was a simple fact that Ghana acted wrongly.
If you look at the AG
unitized
statement,
when our law.
Yeah, I'll come to your statement or letter to the president later. I just want to go through some of the things the AG said and the way to check. For example, the AG claimed that the tribunal affirmed Ghana's right or authority to unitize the fields. Right? So this is partially true because the tribunal recognized Ghana's authority to unitize, but found that the way they went about it was wrong.
That was not even before the court.
By including that in the case, they were just, you think they were trying to obfuscate the matter because in the statement they included that. The AG,
that's the Attorney General's statement.
Yes.
The right to unitize is in law. It's in our law. But what should activate the law, that right, is what the government failed to understand. What activates that right is the scientific body of evidence that actually suggests that we need to unitize the field. And that we did not do. And that's why we lost the case. All right? As for the minister directing or asking for unitization, if you agree, it's procedural or administrative, if you like, to give it a sanction to say that we agree, yes. In fact, the government can also reject unitization, even when the companies agree to unitize. And there is a particular case, even with the same arguments, when ENI decided to tie back their urban discovery, which is on the Block 4, also adjacent to the OCTPP project. The government declined. They said they won't allow you to do it. Do a separate development. That was the right that they exercised. And it's a separate block, and they could actually do that. So they stopped them from tying back, optimizing infrastructure, making sure that we don't develop a new field, but they can produce from that discovery, tying it to the OCTP project. They didn't allow them to do that. So it is the right of the state to decline or affirm unitization. But you need to produce that evidence that actually confirms that, yes, it makes economic sense to unitize for all the parties.
But of course, the point about the tribunal dismissing all claims against GNPC is correct. Because the claimant included GNPC as one of the respondents. But all the claims against GNPC were dismissed, and the AG points that out.
No, so this is the point. So the case was between Ghana GNPC, because GNPC is party to the agreement, right? And if the unitization action, came from, a report that was generated by GNPC to say that, yes, we have evidence that the oil straddles the two blocks, and therefore there needs to be, produced jointly. They needed to sue GNPC as well. So GNPC also lost. It's not only the AG that lost. The AG and his agencies that were in court, they all lost. So the cost that would have been borne by the state, including GNPC, is what has not materialized. So there's no action on the part of GNPC here. But if they proceed with the unitization, GNPC assets and everything could be part of the claims. They could be, injuncted or whatever the term is, to make sure that they recover their money.
Fair enough. Now, 3 years ago, almost this week, you wrote to the president. Today is 10th July. Your letter to the president is 16 July 2021. I thought that was quite interesting. 3 years ago this week, you wrote a letter asking the president to advise GNPC and the ministry to stop the attempted unitization. What did you see about how they were going that made you write this letter? And by the way, did the president ever respond to this letter at all?
To start from the letter, we didn't receive any response from the president. And you will see from the letter, we copied the chief of staff, we copied the president himself, and then the vice president. And we thought that as citizens, we didn't necessarily need to push these issues in the public domain, because there were issues that, to our understanding, could be resolved by applying all the technical examinations that were required to be able to resolve the matter and also keep investors confident in Ghana. So when we heard and saw the actions from the ministry and the AGs and the rest of it. And we thought that, there was a need for some intervention above those organs or those agencies. We had to write to the president, and we wrote to the president, at least asking him to take a second look at the opinion of the Ministry of Energy and perhaps seek third-party advice if necessary. Because from where we sat and the technical people we had spoken to, including many Ghanaian engineers who have worked with ExxonMobil, they've worked with Saudi Aramco, they worked with BP, and all of them thought this was laughable and an embarrassing situation for Ghana to go through. So we thought that we could draw the attention of the president to it so that we don't get into the situation that we're in now and avert a possible suit by a government. And in between the period also, we have seen even the claimants or the other party making overtures to the state on the assumption that the people who were handling the matter didn't understand the technical details of what they were dealing with. And they had made overtures to the president, to everybody else in the space, and they were still not making any headway. So we thought that we could write to at least also highlight that even if you don't believe what we are saying, you don't believe what anybody else is saying, but your ministers and your agencies, just take a second look for a third-party advice, and be able to address this matter in a way that sustains the oil industry the way we had projected or wanted it to actually go. And we also pointed out the risks involved, because this is a project, over $7 billion investment, that had been securitized by the World Bank, and any impact on that also affects our credit rating and our credit risk. Beyond that also, we needed more oil revenues to be able to address post-COVID development issues. And therefore, it was the wrong time for us to inject this unnecessary arbitration on ourselves. So we thought we could write to him and perhaps get some response that would protect the interest of the state. And it was just a good faith communication to the president. We never got a response for it.
Now, what your main argument was that even though legally Ghana has the grounding to unitize, the scientific basis for the unitization had not been established, and the financial implications of going to unitization without that scientific basis was going to be dire for the country. That was what you tried to say to the president.
Absolutely. Because if you want to, what we are trying to do is to make sure that if they are all producing from one discovery or one reservoir, then there is no need to develop, essentially, to develop two FPSOs, which means that the cost on Ghana is higher. One FPSO, for example, is 2 billion. So if Springfield also goes to build another FPSO, another 2 billion, all of that will be recovered from the petroleum revenues. And therefore, it becomes an additional cost to the state and unwarranted. So for you to avert that, you want to establish that indeed they are all producing or going to produce from the same discovery, and then you cost the unitization. And the way to prove that is to make sure that the discoveries are properly appraised, all the well testings are done to ensure that you know that they connect before you can take that decision. Even in some instances, even when there is no connection, proximity can help the state to cause a unitization. You can say that, because they are too close to each other, let's find ways to produce them together. So that way you assess the volume on each side of the divide, and then you apportion costs so that you save money by producing from those two blocks. But that's not the case we're doing. We're just sitting in a room, desktop reading, and reports were being generated to say that the wells were connected, when indeed the drilling and testing that has to be done on the ground had not been done. And those who were not EV engineers, when we read the reports that were coming from GMPs, we were so alarmed, because we were quoting pressures that looked virgin compared to the field that had been producing for almost 3 years. And we're like, so didn't you realize that if a field had produced for 3 years and the other side is still virgin, the pressures were still high, almost the same as before the ENI side started production, the indications are that they are not connected. And therefore you needed to prove, how you think that even though the pressures are not the same after production, you still think they are connected. And it didn't make sense for anybody looking at those documents. And internationally, Ghana became a laughing stock. And that's why we thought that the president needed to intervene so that we could address that and allow investment to continue to flow in and allow the industry to thrive the way we were anticipating it could go.
Ben, we'll come back to you to look at what all of this means for the future of that sector. But this is the point of view. We're talking to Ben Boakye on the very controversial arbitration that led to what is now being described as an embarrassment for the government of Ghana, the attempt to unitize the ENI and Vitol field with Springfield. When we come back, we'll look at those. Later on, we speak to the people who are behind the petroleum hub that wants to bring in many, many things to Ghana's petroleum sector. Stay with us. Welcome back. So tonight we're heavy on petroleum. My guest is Ben Boakye. We're looking at the award in the arbitration between ENI and Vitol on one hand and the government of Ghana in GMPC. And initially I described the award as a victory on points for the two companies. Ben says it was a technical knockout and that the main thing they went for they got, which of course the main thing went for they got. Ben, let's just see where this is headed. From the posture of the Attorney General, do you see Ghana continuing with an attempt to unitize? Or is this technical knockout enough for them to back off completely? What do you see their action, their next line of action?
It's difficult to predict, but I don't think the unitization issue should be off the table. What they need to do is to do the right thing. Make sure that they can generate the scientific evidence. Make sure that the well testings, the appraisals that have to be done will be done to actually establish how much oil is in that area where they want to claim unitization for. And that is the only benefit Ghana gets. If they do appraisal and realize that there is no oil in that place that can commercially be produced, Ghana would have lost just unitizing the two fields. So what we need to do is to make sure that the unitization is right, is justifiable, and Ghana benefits from it. So I'm hoping that they will do that. But most importantly also, there are processes in court in Ghana that the Attorney General will have to intervene so that the 900 million claim doesn't get activated. Because the more it drags and Springfield holds on to that to win cases in the local court, that could trigger the consequences as has been laid out in the arbitral award. So those are things that if the Attorney General is minded, he will be focused on to ensure that those things could be addressed. They put out the directive based on which the court has been making some ruling. They have to communicate appropriately to the courts that the directive they issued has been struck out by a court, by international court of arbitration, and therefore they no longer hold for those decisions to be reversed. The sad reality is that while this thing was in court, the managers of the OCTP, Vitol managers, ENI managers, they all couldn't stay in Ghana because the courts were making contemptuous rulings against them, and they feared arrest by staying in Ghana. So they were operating Ghana like we are having a Zoom call remotely.
Wow.
And this is the time to really bring that confidence, to get people comfortable staying in Ghana without any fear of local arrest.
Ben, the last time we spoke, we looked at the dwindling fortunes of that sector in relation to lower output and lack of new investment in the past 3 years. Do you see a relationship between this matter and possibly the lack of new investment and development of new fields? Is there a relationship there?
There is a relationship. I mean, if you look at our neighboring countries, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire in particular, the only company that is aggressively exploring and making discoveries is ENI. They have made 3 discoveries in Ghana in the past 4 years. They've made 2 major discoveries in Cote d'Ivoire, and they brought their oil field in Cote d'Ivoire in record time. And the discovery they made in Ghana were before the discovery in Cote d'Ivoire. But because of the regulatory regime, they were able to quickly bring that on stream and generating revenue for the state of Cote d'Ivoire. So if we're able to address these issues, bring back investor confidence, it could inure to our benefit, and people will now be able to invest freely, thinking that the state will protect those investments. If the risk to the oil industry is the state itself, then it's difficult for people to put in their money. And it clearly shows that sustenance capital, as we indicated in our letter to the president, has been dwindling. They're not pumping in money to sustain the fields. And even one of the reliefs that they sought was on sustenance, because they said that the investment that they could have done to optimize the field to produce more oil, they couldn't do it because of those claims that were coming their way. So if they had been able to spend more, optimize the field, produce more oil, Ghana would have benefited. We have lost those revenues, and our oil production has been dwindling ever since. So we need to rectify that going forward.
Well, I need to commend you for your work, because clearly you saw into the future. And if the government had listened to you, we probably would have used a different approach and would have been producing more oil from that field. And I think that's credit to the work of civil society. So thank you for your work, and thank you for talking to us on this show, Ben Boakye. Ben Boakye is the Executive Secretary or Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. When we come back, we're still in this sector. The government wants to develop over 20,000 acres of what they call the Petroleum Hub. They've set up the Petroleum Hub Development Corporation. I'm going to speak to the Chief Executive, Charles Owusu, when we come back, to tell us more about this very ambitious project and address some critical questions that have been asked about its feasibility, how realistic it is, and whether they've taken other factors into consideration. Stay with us. We're still here on The Point of View, talking many issues. My guest for the next segment is the CEO of Ghana's Petroleum Hub Development Corporation, or PHDC, in the person of Charles Owusu, to tell us more about this hub. It's been in the news for quite a while. 2020, Parliament passed the bill, and they've been working quite hard to get things started. They also signed a $12 billion agreement for just the first phase. So it seems like a very massive project. Mr. Owusu, thanks for joining us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Ben, for having me, and good evening to your viewers.
So this PHDC and then the hub is not new, right? I think the first time I heard about it was in 2020 when the bill was passed. Just walk us through the various timelines. How did we get here?
Thank you, Bernard. So Petroleum Hub Development Corporation, or the Petroleum Hub project, is one of the president's vision that was announced in 2017. But fast forward 2020, December 2029, the bill was assented to, that became an act. So we have the Petroleum Hub Development Corporation Act 2020, Act 1053.
Okay.
If you take the section 2, that gives the broad mandate that to promote and develop petroleum and petrochemical hub in Ghana. And in Ghana, this is where the board has strategically said, okay, in Ghana, then the location is Jomro, because a lot of work has been done by the task force in accordance with the master plan. So Jomro, because there were 3 strategic locations that was undertaken by the task force. So we're looking at Salt Pond area, we are looking at Atuabo, and then Jomro itself.
Okay.
Jomro, because Bernard, having read the master plan and visited the place, I think nature has blessed Jomro with the deepest depth of seawater, which ranges from 16 to 27. That work was done by Ghana Maritime Authority. What that means is that it should be able to accommodate all manner of vessels. And doing such project of a training destination for oil and gas, then you need that depth. If you take Takoradi Port, for instance, their depth is within 16 to 18. So that is why Takoradi is not able to move along this oil and gas enclave because of the depth. So Jomro is very critical for this project, and I believe God did that purposely for such monumental project. Secondly, Jomro has a flat land. That is good for construction and also less displacement of people. Remember, SDG is very critical about life and livelihood. And so technically, about 2 communities were supposed to be resettled, but we did 4 because of for future sake. And transportation, Bernard, if you take Jomro, Jomro is closer to major discoveries of crude oil around us. So Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and even the Ghana oil fields are just close, about 5 kilometers. All the fields are there. So it makes it economic-wise to position this project in Jomro. And lastly, the hospitality of these people in Jomro makes it very accommodating, because it's a whole city that is coming up. So everybody will be trooping there. We need peace to be able to do this project. So that is why the location was selected. Having done that, there were 3 preparatory activities that was undertaken. One is, how do you acquire this land compulsorily? If you take the Land Act 1036 from section 240 to 249, it gives you what government must do, or the state, to be able to acquire land compulsorily going forward. All this thing has been done. Then you look at the environment. Is the location right with respect to environmental issues to go ahead? EPA did a fantastic job by getting what we call strategic environmental assessment, which is the C. Looking at the policy of that nature. Then the last thing was the spatial plan. Where do we put refinery? Where do we put petrochemical plant? Where do we put storage? All this thing has been done. And that one was also done by LUSPA. So putting this together is what is preparing, or has prepared PAGC in our current situation. Now, the project is looking at 3 refineries with a capacity of 300,000 barrels per stream day. That gives about 900,000 barrels per stream day. 5 petrochemical plants, 10 million cubic meters in terms of storage capacity, and a jetty, 2 jetties. That should be able to accommodate VLCCs and ULCs. That's a very large crude carriers and ultra large crude carriers. And that is why Jomro is critical, because of the depth of their sea. And putting all this is what is termed as the 60 billion US dollar
so
project.
you are mentioning many fantastic figures. So $60 billion.
Yes.
Now, the whole of Ghana's GDP is about $75 billion. So if you are going to attract $60 billion, that's like 90% of our GDP. That's serious. Now, that seems quite ambitious, particularly when for the past 3 years, your oil production has really declined in your main 3 fields, Jubilee, Sankofa, and then 10. You've not signed any new oil agreements in the past 3.5 years. Some people feel like prospects in our oil sector in terms of exploration and production are pointing downwards. So how on earth do you talk about $60 billion in what is essentially a declining oil economy?
Thank you, Bernard. And that is what we are saying, the vision. You see, you need to think beyond the 4 corners of your room. And if you cite Singapore, which has been in this business for over decades, 50 years, 100 years, has never seen a drop of crude before. So what the Singapore did was leveraging on their strategic location, and that is what the president is trying to do. We've claimed we are in the middle of the world, which is true. How then do we monetize this? So it's the vision. So if you look at this project, that's why it's novel. What government is trying to do is to create an enabling environment, get a regulatory framework, and attract investors to come. That's why last month, on the 18th of June, we signed the first phase to the tune of $12 billion US. Ask yourself, how did we do it? It is not because of our crude that is declining, or our economy, which is in this current state, but it's the vision that they see and the consistent demand for petroleum products. So that's why they are, because the market is there, but nobody was creating this enabling environment. Bernard, if you go to Lomé here, do you know Lomé is creating a hub? But the danger is that we call it S2S, ship to ship, and that is very dangerous. And all the products we are getting within the region are just in Lomé, because they bring these huge vessels and then put them into smaller vessels into the neighboring countries. Now you've gotten a 20,000 acre land. Now you are building the refinery, and you are able to discharge and then connect to the various countries, and that is what we seek to do. So it's neither about our decline of our crude, but is the strategic location that we find ourselves and the demand vis-a-vis the supply. So now we're trying to say, okay, going to Rotterdam to pick product, or going to US, or going to Malaysia or Singapore, come to Jomro and pick it, and that is what we seek to do. So it's not just looking at our crude. If not, Singapore will not be where Singapore is number 3 in the world.
So fair enough. So your point is you don't need to be producing that much oil to have a hub because of the other things you do. But still, globally, we are in the period of energy transition. So people are moving away from fossil fuels. Of course, some say gas is our transition fuel, okay? Why will I want to invest $60 billion in what essentially is going to be a declining industry? Because the move towards renewables is massive. So again, try and situate this for me. This seems too good to be true. And the other thing is, we've seen so many things like this. Petronia City, we've seen all kinds of names. I think there was one that was also supposed to be done under the previous government. And all of these things, they sound too good to be true and eventually end up that way. There's a strong suspicion that this petroleum hub is very similar to those things.
Thank you, Bernard. I think let me use this opportunity to thank my minister, Dr. Matthew Poku-Prempeh. I'm just coming from Milan. Last week, the whole world gathered in Milan, Italy, discussing energy transition you were talking about. The critical issue here, Bernard, is about money coming to the developing countries and technology. We see this energy transition is looking at energy trilemma. So energy security, energy just or equity, and the sustainability. But you see, because it has its own geopolitical, the attention is on the sustainability. Bernard, you know that over 600 million Africans do not even have access to electricity. So the energy transition, that is why now it's just. They've given every country to develop how they want to transit. So if you look at Ghana, Ghana has developed 8 energy transition and investment plan till 2026. If you look strategically with this petroleum hub, we have 5 petrochemical plants, and I love the way you put it. Gas is the transition fuel. So after 2060, that is where our energy transition plan for now is looking at. If indeed we are transiting, all you need to do is to configure this your refinery into petchem or hydrogen, because you already have 5 petrochemical plants feeding onto your gas, or the feedstock of this plant is gas. So all you need to do is configure your refinery, and that is the growth strategy. Indeed, if you are going to transit, then you just configure these 3 refineries into a petrochemical plant that will feed into your either fertilizer or the plastics and all of that, the gases, the automobile, and so that is the vision. So Bernard, energy transition, as I've said, I'm just coming from Milan, it's now giving everybody that. Now, do you know what they are saying? Now they say we can explore, but capture. So the technology now is CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Because they realize that people are not ready to move. So if you look at Asia, if you look at the Middle East and Africa, they've made it clear that we are going to use our natural resources to also develop and give jobs to our teeming youth. So that is clear, and it's clear that most countries are now developing their own energy transition. So to me, energy transition, and if you even take the energy transition document, petroleum hub is one of the critical things stated that we need to accelerate petroleum hub. Why? Because look, Bernard, the hub alone is going to have about 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts to feed the enclave. And then if there's any excess, we can even export it.
So, but why is it called petroleum hub and not, say, energy hub? Because if you're looking at the future, I mean, BP, beyond petroleum, right? I mean, that's been there for over a decade. We are basically saying we focus on energy and not fossil fuel. So again, I'm a bit surprised that you call it, but anyway, that's the name you choose to call it. You signed a $12 billion agreement for the first phase. When you say an agreement, what does it mean? Is it that they are committing to pumping money of 12 billion into a project, or they are going to do projects worth 12 billion, or they are prepared to look for money to do projects worth 12 billion? Because those 3 don't mean the same thing. So when you say we've signed a $12 billion agreement, Ghana is looking for 3 billion IMF. Because of that, they are giving us all these conditionalities. If somebody has 12 billion to give you to develop this thing, that should be more seismic than we seem to be hearing. Do you understand my point?
Yeah, so Bernard, I think, let me correct your previous statement. If you look at the section 2, it said petroleum and petrochemical hub.
Okay.
So, you know, it's futuristic. So it's not just the petroleum. A name, we can just amend the act and then say energy industrial hub. So I think that one can be done like now people, I don't want to cite certain organizations, they just add energies to their name, but they are still doing what they are doing. That's what I'm saying. The energy transition has its own,
fair enough,
geopolitics and all of that. Now, back to the question about this 12 billion US
agreement.
Dollars. Yes, Bernard, as I said, the project is 60 billion and it's in 3 phases. So we have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 is 12 billion US dollars, phase 2, 27 billion US dollars, and phase 2, 27 billion, and phase 3, 21 billion. This phase, and I said the business model here is government is not partaking. It's a novel. Government is just creating the enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. So this 12 billion is 6 to construct 1 refinery, 1 petrochemical plant, 3 million storage, and a jetty. Now, the 12 billion is made up of both equipment or capital expenditure and also real cash coming in, because you know this refinery, all this equipment has to be imported. So evaluating the cost of all this infrastructure is what is termed as the 12 billion. So it's both cash and equipment, as you rightly put it. So if give or take per experience, about 4 billion will be the real cash that will hit the economy, because most of the items will be shipped into the country.
So these companies, TCP, UIC, which is, I'm told, Touchstone Capital Group,
China Huan,
they are the companies that will raise the funding or they will do the construction. What are they doing? So
combination of the two. So you see, this project is EPC plus F. So they are raising their funding and they are doing their construction. Remember, it is a build, own, and operate. As I said, it is a novel way of doing projects in Africa. Unlike first, government is leading everything or partnering or even doing BOT. No. This time around, and also as you rightly said, because of the energy transition, all of them has been factored. You build, you own, and you operate. So it is the lifespan of the assets, and every refinery, depending on the technology you use, will last up to 50 years. And after the 50 years, you can reconfigure to another 50 years. So depending on where the world is going, you can decide to, okay, I'm reconfiguring to maybe 20 years just to mark time. So that is how the whole project. So this consortium is raising the funding, and then the EPC in terms of the engineering, procurement, and construction. And so that's why it's in a consortium. So if you look at it, the one is looking at the chemicals. The China State construction is looking at the refinery, and then the Touchstone is more like the arranger, trying to pull this team together. And then you have UIC as a local Ghanaian, so looking at the local content. So that is how it's been done strategically.
When you look at your timeline, 2020 you got the law in place, 2024 you signed an agreement. What's the next significant thing that's going to happen?
Great. So from where we sit in terms of government, each phase has 5 years time span, so that's 15 years in all. Looking at their development plan of this consortium, they are looking at 48 months, that's 4 years. So after signing, what next? Bernard, next month, 12th of August, there's going to be a groundbreaking and a commission of our project office, which is about 50 people. So they're going to break grounds, start clearing from September, and then do their feed, that's the front-end engineering design, and then pause because, you know, we have election. And then come back in March and start the construction. So this is the roadmap for the first phase. And Bernard, it will interest you to know, phase 2 and phase 3, negotiation is ongoing seriously, and to also raise the 48 billion that is left to sum up to the 60 billion. So this is the roadmap for the phase 1. I don't know, you want me to repeat it?
Yes. Is there bipartisan support for this in terms of, it's a government initiative and the bill was passed in 2020, but are you confident that if there's a change in government, this project will continue?
But I can tell you, when you meet Parliamentary Select Committee, Mines and Energy, it is the opposition side that is actually lambasting the current government that why are you not supporting PADCs? Why are you not? So you see that the whole thing is the vision, what it seeks to do for the country and the continent, because it's creating about 780,000 jobs. And you know,
It's creating about how many?
780,000 jobs. This one was done by LUSPA. Okay, so every politician goal is to give jobs to their people, and not even only jobs. It's going to put Ghana on the global map, and also become a major trading destination. Remember, now Ghana is a trading hub. So if you have this energy hub, you are good to go. So I'm telling you, both parties are in agreement with this project.
The size of the project is, in terms of the land acreage, was it 20,000 acres?
Yes, 20,000 acres.
Initially, when the announcement was made in 2021, some residents of Nzima land asked for the size reduced to 5,000 acres. If I can read, a group calling itself Concerned Citizens of Nzima Descent wanted the 20,000 acres of the land being acquired for the hub at Bonyere in Jomoro to be reduced to 5,000 acres. Did this come to your attention? What kind of engagements were done?
Yes, so I met them. I remember when you read this, we met them Easter Monday. Bernard, Easter Monday, I didn't have break because, you know, most of them are in the diaspora. So we did a virtual. There were about 50 to 100. They asked all their questions, and then I explained to them. This 20,000 acre land was not even done by PADC. That's what I'm saying. This project is more collaborative. It was done by LUSPA. And it was done even in assistance with the Malaysian and Singapore, because it is each infrastructure you're doing and the size of land that you need. So I just broke it down for them that if you take this 20,000, Bernard, there's 3,500 acres just for nature reserve, and about 1,690 for open space. If you add this, you are getting about 5,500, which is not going to be used. The reason why we brought the nature reserve, that as we grow and expand, people start encroaching, and we want to protect this nature reserve. So it's in, because then we have that capacity to protect it. So technically, we are using 11,000 to do this industrial work. Bernard, if you go to Malaysia currently, the project that Petronas and Saudi Aramco is doing, 12 billion projects for their first phase, Bernard, they are using 22,000 acres in Malaysia. If you come to Singapore, which is an island, they are using 8,000 acres. And because they don't have space, they have underground where they do storage. If you add all of them, you are going to around 12,000. And that we understand because of their peculiar situation. If you go to Rotterdam, they are doing about 30,400 acres. So I explained also, okay, they didn't know that, because they thought all the 20,000 was going to do the way. So I just gave them a close by Dangote. Dangote is not a hub, it's a refinery. Dangote is sitting at about 6,500. So I told them that I don't have issue with the number of sites you want us to use, because they are, and if you take other angle, they are coming from experience that government and they will come for land and later share among them. So I was explaining to them that if they can break this 5,000 down for us, what are we going to use this 5,000 for? How many refineries? How many? If we can accommodate all this project that we want to embark on, why not? We will sit down and discuss. So they understood it as at then that you read the publication.
These issues were raised in 2021. So
yes.
They were talking about loss of lands and rivers, depriving indigenous of farming and fishing, environmental degradation of lands and water bodies from spillage and petroleum and petrochemical effluents and gases. They spoke of a lack of framework for relocating and resettlement of affected towns and households. Have these matters been addressed? Yes.
So, Bernard, the first thing, sometimes that's I refer to where such things have been done. Right now, if you go to Singapore, Bernard, Singapore hub is in the middle of the world. I say of the world. It's the middle of Singapore, because the country has grown to meet it. But there are no space. So that's why technology is critical in doing such projects, because sometimes the hearsay. But Ghana Gas is just at their next door at Wabo. We have not heard any of such things. So we are in this kind of, when we are doing major projects, such things come. So we've explained to them compensation as we speak now, because of government commitment. Cabinet has directed Ministry of Finance, and they are working on it, and very soon we will start paying, because we have to pay before we start the construction as I outlined the program outline in my previous answer. So everything is being done. We are engaging them. No, Bernard, we've engaged them, and to the extent that they told that they don't want to see our face again, we should come and start the work. So the whole of last year, we did not go to Jomro. And so this year that we've signed that, they are happy that we're trying to also go there, engage them and continue. So I think it's more about understanding the respect for one another, and I think they've done what.
So that's all we have time for today's edition of The Point of View, which has been very heavy on petroleum. First part, we're looking at the arbitration award, you can say, against Ghana, which Vitol and ENI took to international arbitration. We spoke to Ben Boakye, and then of course we just finished with Charles Owusu of the Petroleum Hub. We'll see how all these things pan out in the next few days. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.